I'm delighted to introduce this video produced in partnership with the Royal Institute of Architects of Ireland and the Department of Culture, Heritage and the Gaeltacht on our approaches to our built and historic environment. Well, this video and the associated publication is designed to provide best practice advice for professionals, owners and businesses on how to approach our historic built infrastructure.
So the video is an accompaniment to the online book, and it shows examples of where architects have worked with people to bring a whole range of projects back to being fabulous homes. We have individual houses that are protected structures. We've got homes in the countryside, which were farm buildings that are now stunning places to live. But we also have projects from the smaller scale where you're looking at living over the shop and you've the potential to live in a town, village or city, to a larger scale where a whole quarter has been revitalised to provide a fantastic new urban village within an existing city area. And we really hope that it will inspire people and encourage people to take on these kinds of projects.
So we first came across this building about 8 years ago. It had been on the market for a couple of years. Nobody wanted it. It was derelict and it wasn't selling. The upper floors were still in their Georgian format and were uncombined. And we felt we could combine those to make a great house and then try and use the roof of the 1960s extension to create a big roof garden. I guess when you're working with a historic building, you're sort of all the time uncovering and having to reimagine what you want to do or how you are working with it. You're all the time thinking about how can you repair the building and trying to make sure that the layers you're adding in don't fundamentally damage what was there before and allow the building to last hopefully for another maybe 200 years or into the future. So I think when you're taking on a project like this, or any project that has some significant historical element to it, it's very important that you work with a good conservation architect. Working on this project, it was certainly key. So we love this house. We've been here now for 5 years and it's made a great home. We wondered about living right in the city as we do. We live in a very busy street in the city centre, and we wondered how we would feel about living here. It was a big change from where we lived before, but we absolutely adore it. The house itself is delightful. Living on the upper floor, so our reception rooms and roof garden are at first floor, and then we've bedrooms at second floor level, so you feel like you're living in the light all of the time, which is really super. Reusing an existing building is also a very energy efficient thing to do, or to get more value out of an existing building. Existing buildings contain a lot of embodied energy. Huge amount of energy has gone into constructing existing buildings. So trying to take them and make them more energy efficient and then populating our city centres is really important, and also gives a very good quality of life.
The original context of this farmyard is it belongs to Note House, which is a house just up on the hill, and it must have been a beautiful place, what, 1860. Everything in the farmyard had a purpose. It was a really busy place, and the steward's house is just across the way, and that's part of the whole place. This building here had no roof. Some of the wall had been demolished by my father to make it easier to feed cattle. The shed itself was actually a slatted unit, which is basically where a well is dug out in the middle of the building, which my brothers dug out by hand when they were about 15 and 16 years of age. And it's then slatted over with concrete slats. It's lovely to see it repurposed now and come alive again.
We've built this timber structure within the original structure. It supports the 2 bedrooms overhead, and the floor has been made with Wicklow sand, Wicklow granite, and actually cast in position. And the staircase that's behind me, you can see that that's cast concrete and polished. So there's an interesting connection between the material that made the original walls and the material and sand which now makes the new and quite modern looking floor. The stone came from Ballyknocken. The McAvoy brothers cut the stone, dressed the stone, supply the stone. So probably the stone in Ballyknocken was where the stone came from here originally. So there's that interesting connection across the centuries.
But we had 2 fantastic Polish builders, Radek and Maciu. Nothing was ever a problem, and they understood the drawings and they understood what Michael wanted to do, and that I think was very important because I was confident with them doing what they had to do. The roof lights were specialised, all the timber, the joinery, every little piece of work they did, and they really enjoyed it and I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the project. I don't think we had any rows, and I suppose the difference of working with an architect and builders who get each other.
The project here is rehabilitation of an existing building, late 19th century building, from bedsits into 5 apartments. It was in reasonable condition. I mean, what was really interesting of the building was that most of the original architectural features retained. So the cornices, the centerpieces, the architraves, joinery, doors, and the main stairs was intact. We looked at traditional approaches of panelling, boat design, spaces which are carefully planned, very high quality. So what we did is we accommodated all of the bathrooms and kitchens within panelling along the external perimeters of the wall within, let's say, accommodation which only went up to a certain height, so typically about slightly less than 8 feet. And then above that, then the original proportions of the rooms are retained, so you can see the cornices and so on. And one of the features which I think has worked out very well is that we put the shared laundry facilities and services in the return at the rear, and it allowed us to provide a little bit more accommodation to the apartments themselves. And we had an excellent client. I mean, no project is successful without a very good client, and he had very high ambitions for the project. And I think the whole team involved, you know, collaborated together very well, and that it's visible in the outcome here.
It just took a few weeks more than 6 months, as I remember, and the building was in a really very bad condition. So we were really skeptic if it would be possible to have it done in such a short term. But finally, so the builder and the architects worked perfectly together, and we brought some ideas from Germany, and so everything really went very well. It's a very good feeling, especially when you get up into this floor we are right now, and in that extension in the return with the views over the Wicklow Mountains and down into the city, and that gives you, on 6 square meters, this gives you the feeling of a little castle, so it's really perfect.
It's an old late Georgian property dating from around the mid-1840s. Before we could do anything in terms of the aesthetics of it, we had to structurally improve the building. We also underpinned and lowered the basement floor because it was only 6 foot high. The challenge for us was to bring an old building like this up to current building regulation standards, particularly with regard to fire, where we have to create a good separation between the flats and between the commercial unit on the ground floor as well. We've managed to retain an awful lot of the historic fabric of the building. The original floors were kept, the ceilings were kept, and lime render was used then throughout to maintain the brickwork, the old brickwork. With close collaboration with Dublin City Conservation Department, we were able to achieve something which is now a very workable and viable unit on the ground floor. This part of Pier Street was, although it's very, very close to the centre of Dublin, was right opposite Trinity College almost, it was rather run down. And I think that rehabilitating this building in particular has made a difference just to this stretch, certainly of Pier Street, but also in the wider area. And I think the importance there really is that re-inhabiting buildings like this, which can often be left in a pretty bad state, and people are often scared to do any work to them. But I think the reward is significant because there's great character in these buildings, and if you can just unlock that.
Two things really impressed me when I walked the site first. Firstly was the range and variety of buildings that we had on site here. We had 10 different protected structures, and each of the buildings were in their own state of disrepair. We had buildings that were stables that were used to house soldiers, artillery, there were stores, and there was an officer's mess. So there was a complete range of buildings that you would expect to find in a barracks building in an urban setting. The second thing that really impressed me was not just the buildings, but the spaces between the buildings and the potential to create new spaces. We had all the ingredients here to create a new urban village. We had a main square, we had courtyards, we had streets, alleyways, gardens. So what we had initially was an incomplete jigsaw puzzle, and the challenge here was to try and create and design those new pieces to complete the puzzle. The brief from our client Kennedy Wilson was to provide units for single people, groups of people and families with kids. And that can be difficult enough when you're dealing with new buildings, but in old buildings it was a real challenge. What we did was we kind of allowed the buildings themselves to tell us where the solutions were by looking at where the staircases were, where the windows were, where the load-bearing walls were. So they sort of guided us to how we would subdivide the buildings. We weren't shoehorning in a typical plan. We were actually allowing the buildings themselves to tell us how to subdivide them. The other challenge that we had, I suppose, really was you run into problems sometimes when you ask an old building to perform like a new building. These buildings were built at a time where people's expectations of how they were going to perform thermally were much different to today. So it is important to get really good expert advice on those sort of things. You can do more damage insulating an old building incorrectly than not insulating it at all. Any interventions we made on the old buildings were expressed as modern interventions, whether it was for the buildings themselves within an urban design context, or whether it was a window where we had to make an existing window bigger. We kept the old piece of the window and we restored that, but we expressed the new piece of the window as a new element. So that was a very simple philosophy that we were rigorous with right through the whole project, whether it was a small detail or whether it was a large building within a site context. We uncovered this colonnade which was south-facing, which was fantastic, and it immediately said, okay, we have to have the living rooms down here, we have to have spaces looking out onto private terraces. So it was really, it's all about understanding your building, and when you understand your building, it will give you hints and it will give you guides of how to use them properly. I think what we've achieved here really illustrates what can be done when you integrate existing buildings into new development, and it is possible to reuse our architectural heritage to create sustainable communities for future generations.
So the RIAI is delighted to have had the opportunity to work with the department to develop this guide, looking at the opportunities that are available to people to bring an older property back to life as a new home, or on how to upgrade their existing older property into the home of their dreams. These offer really exciting opportunities, and there's great potential in older buildings, but there's also challenges, and we wanted to ensure that people get the right advice when they're embarking on these projects. It's really important that they work with qualified professionals who understand the complexity of what they're trying to do, who can take them through all of the regulatory steps that they have to do, can take them through the building contract, but can also look at the building and look at what all of the possibilities are. And that is what a qualified architect can do.